2 chapters today, and I'm sorry if I'm a little scattered, but it is very hot out, and that's just affecting my brain. Those 2 chapters would be career advice and grump. 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 I blame the heat on that one. What I found really spoke to me in this set of chapters is, sort of initially I was looking at the idea of looking forward, sort of even though we've had these revelations about the past, looking forward and plans for the future. Long-term in the careers advice discussion, more short-term in the discussion of helping with grump. But then I realized that's actually just a small piece of what's occurring in this chapter, and we actually do, this set of chapters, I apologize, but we do actually have sort of an overarching theme here in which we fight the powers that be. That is to say that we have several examples, a lot of examples, of different ways that you can actually combat negative people, negative events, oppressive events and people and regimes. We're actually getting this really interesting sort of fight for what is right and what we deserve going on here in a lot of different ways. Moving from the more obvious things like straight up tactics of subterfuge, aka Harry breaking into Umbridge's office and the use of the Weasley twins as a distraction, to the more outright actually fighting back, which would be, of course, once the Weasley twins are gone, everybody just going for the mischief side of things, and going at it like that. But those aren't the super interesting ones. We are seeing suddenly the school come together in a fight the power sort of way, in which you'll notice that most of the other students, aside of course from the Inquisitor squad running around, that most of the students have banded together in protest without actually, actively seeming to band together. We don't have another Dumbledore's army forming within the school. We simply have people who are exploding with mischievousness, and no one else is much complaining. Like, the dung bombs are going off so much that students have just learned the bubble-headed charm. There's not a whole lot of, I can't believe people are doing this, except from this one small squad that everyone is now fighting against. They just go for it. And accept that this is how we fight the power. And then, of course, we start getting a lot of hints at different ways to actually fight the power. And these tend to be more on the long-term scale than the short-term scale. So just like how we have looking forward, the difference between trying to take care of Gromp in the immediate future to Harry wants to grow up to be an Auror, we actually have this response to these negative people on the short term, exploding in mischievousness, moving into the long term. Not starting with, but more obvious fact is the fleeing of Fred and George. The peace, we're out. Because of course theirs is a more long-term plan. They've got their business established and they're going to run it. But that's not just the immediate, like, we need to get out of here because the Umbridge is driving us insane. No, I've got a fly flying around. No, we've got a business to run. And that leads us to, again, some of the smaller ones we get hinted at here, but are just as key as this initial dung bomb, portable swamp, giving snack boxes response. And that is the idea of doing it anyways. And when I say that, what I mean is, it's the moments like Umbridge is saying, well, Harry Potter will never be an Auror, and McGonagall turning around and saying, I think he can do it anyways. It's showing belief in a person in the long term, and saying, I can see your worth here, and you could bring yourself up. Because in truth, you look at a lot of his marks, and it's true, his marks are very weak in certain areas. Need to get better if he wants to be an Auror. But straight up, she says, I think you can work for it, and I will work with you to help you do it. And that flies in the face of Umbridge. It's the idea of growing up to be better people, where we see happen with James, to the point where Lily actually was willing to go out with him and marry him. Because he had to learn from his mistakes and grow up to be a better person. With both Remus and Sirius, we're actually seeing the growing up to be a better person also includes the admittance that you were not good people. Which all three of them, the two of them, and they're willing to admit it with James as well, but they're fully willing to admit that we were not good people. And in fact, to point out that most people aren't at 15, that you need to grow up and grow beyond that, that's key. And it becomes reassurance to Harry that his own actions here at 15, and his father's choices, and his mother's choices, and Snape's choices, at that age are not the end-all and be-all. We are having that moving horizon, and in fact, the best way to prove somebody wrong at this point in time is to grow up to be better people, particularly better people than they are. And that becomes the thing for Harry, is to grow up to be a better person than Snape, who is outright sabotaging his work. To be able to grow up better than Umbridge, who is power-hungry and oppressive. It's even to grow up to be a better person than his godfather Sirius, and his father was, and his mother was, and Remus Lupin. It is to grow up continually improving. And that becomes one of the things that is going to undermine all of the negative people in your life. Is if you look at that and say, I'm not going to be like you. I am going to grow up to be better than you. I'm going to grow up to be a good person. If you're from an abusive home, you're the type of people that grow up to not be abusive, to love your kids, to break that cycle as much as possible. And that's the thing, is with people like Sirius and Snape, we aren't seeing that on a wider scale. Sirius can admit to some wrongdoing, but he hasn't gotten to the point where he isn't as impulsive and angry as he was. That's still there. So when you're fighting the powers that be, sometimes that even means improving yourself beyond the people on your own side. Because you can learn these lessons from everybody. You can learn what flaws you don't want from people that you care about, and that's okay. You can certainly also learn it from people that you dislike immensely, which is what happens with the Gryffindors with Ron, who actually adopt the Slytherin song as a hip hip hooray. you can grow up to work towards things that people will tell you constantly you cannot achieve. And this is not just the Aurora goal for Harry. This is trying to take care of Hagrid's brother. This is looking at Gromp and saying he is worth fighting for just as much as anybody else here, even when people on your own side, like friends or Hermione or Harry, can't see it. Even when it hurts you, to keep going because saving somebody is worth it is an immense way of fighting against the powers that be. Particularly when we see that the Ministry of Magic has this issue with different magical creatures. To suddenly look at them and say, why should I buy into all the rhetoric you're spewing when I know that this person is worth it? And Hagrid shows us this with all manner of creatures. Between the Thestrals and even his spiders, who he can communicate with well, the dragon Norbert, his half-brother Gromp, all of these creatures that people just want to write off as not worth it, Hagrid is fighting for. And that is key. When you look at something like the Ministry, where literally you just need an owl in Muggle studies, not even a newt, just an acceptable owl in Muggle studies, you can work with Muggles. That tells you where the focus for the Ministry of Magic is, and it's for themselves, and they will write off anything else as beneath them to get there. And Hagrid's fighting that. Even when his own side tells him to stop, he refuses. He's going to keep moving forward, and he's aware of the position he's in. He's not doing it stupidly. He's aware that he is likely to get, like, sacked by Umbridge, and quite possibly arrested because of his connection to Dumbledore. Same thing happens with McGonagall. It becomes this fight for what is right, even if everything else in the system is going to crush you. It is doing it anyways. Even when your own side says to stop. And the smallest one we see, but is super important, is the other way to fight, in which the best bet is to ignore it. Because at first they're going to laugh at you. And then you're going to change the world. Having never stooped down to their level, or very few times stooped down to the level, or stooped down to their level and then learned that's not the person you want to be, and then rose above it. Those moments where McGonagall is ignoring Umbridge and talking very seriously with Harry mean the world to me, even more than the Umbridge-McGonagall shouting match that meeting descends into. It is the moment where McGonagall is looking Harry in the eye and saying, "You are more important to me right now than whatever the Ministry wants to say." And that speaks volumes in silence, and that is the coolest thing in the world. Okay, I'm now overly emotional, but I'm also going to attribute that to the heat today, because it is really hot. I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.